let me give a presentation on what we've done as part of genome editing. How is it perceived in a pig breeding? Raphaëlle Ducros was in charge of this from 2000 and 2001. Well, first of all, the targeted changes in genome, what are they? In fact, what we're talking about are the CRISPR systems discovered in 2012. A Nobel Prize was awarded to the author. These are what we call molecular scissors that recognize and cut off a specific sequence, a unique sequence of DNA. Compared with the previous methods, this is a system which is more targeted. The field is wider, it's quicker, faster, and less costly. Much less costly. This is why it's a real revolution. It's much easier, faster, and less costly. A very promising system for breeders, putting an end to controversial practices. They often referred to the use on cows, not to have to pull off the horns of cows to improve human or animal health, to improve productivity, or some zootechnical criteria to decrease the negative impact on the environment and to adapt, to help animals adjust to climate change. These are the few promises, useful messages, but you see there are many promising applications of this CRISPR technique for breeders. So what about this GIS, the group, what are we doing? They wanted to study this new genetic technologies in French society. Why? Because the use in breeding is already authorized in other countries, in Japan, USA, in Great Britain, but within the European Union, their use on animals is banned. It is not authorized because these techniques are equated to GMOs. However, there are a lot of thinking going on in order to transform this legal situation, in order to create a new status specific for new genetic solutions and perhaps have them applied to breeding and animals. So the starting point is a qualitative inquiry. We interviewed some 50 actors of the controversy coming from the farming environment, R&D in farming, selection, retail industry, a few politicians, civil society, and other associations. So the outcome of these interviews is that new genetic technologies create uncertainties on different parts, different themes. First of all, let's call them social-political uncertainties. I mean, the perception that society has of this method. Then there are environmental uncertainties. What about biodiversity? Some kind of fear that gene transfers into wider population is a source of concern. What about the impact of the new genetic technologies on animals and the impact, the effect of these genetic modifications? That uncertainties of a more technological nature. To what extent are we really able to control this technique and to trace them, track them very precisely in organism, human organism? Another one, even though it wasn't mentioned as such initially, is what about the sanitary, the risk for human health? So what do we have there? I'll skip the details, but you can find them in the article, the written text of my presentation. There are uncertainties that can be grouped in a number of clusters to the agri-farm model. Which model for which technique can they applied in all farming systems? I'll be coming back to this issue. We're also uncertain about the link to living organism. To what extent are we ready to accept human intervention in living organisms? and other uncertainty about the irreversible character. We'll be able to step back once we've crossed the first stage, once we've authorized the use of these technologies. General results. First of all, the topic is limited in its access to R&D, gene selection, a few associations, but these associations are highly specialized. They work for the environment. It's not a public debate, an open forum that really has reached the larger public. And level of knowledge is very unequal because it's highly technical topics. So the arguments, the pros and cons, are not all very elaborate. Sometimes people discover possible application at the time they were interviewed. Say they didn't have time to think about it.
Il y a beaucoup de promesses sur l'utilisation des...
A lot of promises concerning the use of new genetic technologies to improve animal welfare. It's promising, interesting for all farmers, consumers, the animal. It's relevant because farming health has to do a lot with the health. And for instance, removing the horns of an animal is interesting application because it's perceived to be a secondary among the possible applications. It comes after improving the health. However, many people are not convinced. They think that these applications are not really useful because there are more traditional methods available, so you might not need these highly sophisticated techniques. It could come in as a palliative, so you don't have to try and identify the real causes of the animal's well-being. And the question of the horns is perceived as a Trojan horse. It will be used, this application would be used for other purposes. In a way, it's kind of putting your foot in the door to have them applied everywhere for the widespread application rather than one-off. Then what about the farming system where this targeted modification would authorize? Some say that it would be compatible with all breeding systems. It even makes sense. There are many applications compatible with the current system. For others, they say that this method is associated with a conventional intensive model because requires a lot of intervention from outside. It would be a kind of a situation where farmers would be dispossessed. They would have to go via go which way. I think it might be a risk for the image of their job. It would be changed their image, and they would see that someone, CRISPR, is not something that you can do in your backyard. It's something that you can do on large-scale production so that's one position. On the contrary, other thing that it's more relevant. It's relevant and it makes sense, and it will make a significant impact in terms of quantity because the number of animals reached would be wider. So they don't have any problem to have this in the context of intensive breeding system. What about different types of actors according to their position vis-à-vis NTGs, this new technology, genetic technology? Are they in favor, highly in favor, or not at all? And to what extent are they really knowledgeable? Are they specialists or not? There are two very different groups, highly specialized in system, and their arguments is quite convincing. Then those who are opposed, the resistance, were very unfavorable to this new genetic technologies. On the other hand, others are highly convinced that it's a good thing to try. And this group is farming actors, essentially, or who do in favor of a genetic selection. So some people are not sure, they're uncertain, they're not really familiar with the topic, but find it difficult to have a radical opinion and to express it. So on the left, we have the skeptical people. we think that is it really something we need in our trade? Then in the middle, you have the prudent, the cautious. They're not opposed to it, but they're kind of fearful. They want to trigger the same type of a crisis that we had with the GMOs. They say, okay, but only once it's approved by the general population, then perhaps, in other words, they're not willing to take the initiative. And the extreme right, they're very much in favor, they're enthusiasts, they're in favor, but not ready, not just quite ready yet. Even though they know they might be very useful in breeding. So to conclude, the major uncertainties around this topic: irreversibility, question mark, are they really required, necessary? What about the farming model we'd like to incorporate them to? It means that, you're not working on the causes, you're just trying to conceal the symptoms. It's only for a limited interest by the population at large. And the controversy is being built. In other words, it's not the end of the process. Their attitude may change with this new technology. I'd like to thank you for your attention. If you want to see more results, I invite you to read this page of this review where you find any necessary information.